Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us. This is the second online proctoring special interest group session that we've run this year. And I'm joined by some of our sponsors who are going to talk a little bit about the work that they are doing in using AI in online proctoring. What I'm going to do is just go around to each person and just ask them to give 2 or 3 minutes explaining their specific solution. But before I do that, I just wanted to do a bit of a follow-up from the last session where we were trying to understand a bit more about how people are using online proctoring. So I think there's distinct types of online proctoring. There's live, where you have a live proctor who's watching what you're doing. They're actually managing the session. They can stop you, pause the session, etc. Then we've got AI supporting an online proctor, i.e. there's AI is being used to provide advice to the proctor. There's lots of things AI can do that a person can't, etc. But ultimately, the person's still making the decision. There are also other sorts of online proctoring in terms of record and review, where the session is being recorded. So there's no actual person looking at the session while you're taking the exam, but there's recording. Works typically more in an academic type environment where you can check afterwards, where there's perhaps typically only one version of the form, so it doesn't really matter if people see it or copy it or something like that. And that can be reviewed either by a human on a random sampling, or I know that organizations are also doing AI. So we've got distinct different sort of flavors of online proctoring, each equally valid. They've all got their strengths and weaknesses depending on the use case. So what I'm going to do now, it's okay, I'm just going to start off by asking people. I'll go around in the order that's on my screen. So Adarsh, if I could start off with you, please, and just explain a little bit about what you're doing with online proctoring, specifically with AI.
Yeah. Good afternoon, good evening, everyone. My name is Adarsh Sudhindra. I'm the Vice President for Growth and Strategy at Excelsoft. We are an online assessment and proctoring company, a global one. We provide online assessment and proctoring platforms and services to our customers. So we have delivered millions of assessments in the last 12 to 18 months across 12 countries and 4 continents. About 1 million of them were remotely proctored. So we delivered about 1 million exams that were remotely proctored in one way or another. We do remote proctoring ranging from live proctoring to live augmented proctoring, which is live proctoring essentially with which is augmented with AI. We also do live automated proctoring in some of our cases where decisions, of course, with a human supervisor monitoring the AI. We also do quite a good number of record and review based remote proctoring, a good number, especially in some of the emerging markets, both video based record and review as well as image based record and review. AI plays a huge role in all of these modes, even in the high stake exams where there is a human proctor. We see a huge adoption in AI nowadays because people still want to have AI as a backup. They still want the AI analysis turned on as a backup while the human proctor continues to do their live proctoring. So lots of learnings, lots of interactions with customers from different parts of the world. Looking forward to this discussion with the rest of you. Thank you.
You're muted, Pat.
Hi, over to you, Andre, if you want to go next.
Okay, great. So yes, my name is Andre. I'm head of product marketing at OAT. OAT is assessment platform, as the same as Arch. We have delivered over 50 million of tests across the globe in more than 150 continents, 150 countries. We do have the online proctoring, remote and on-site. On remote proctoring, we do have the record and review with the usage of AI. The same as we've been learning with the technology and how we can augment the user usability, over the years, and especially now that it's getting more accessible, the AI and all the technologies, our solution is getting improved. We are about to launch also not only the record and review, and also having the remote proctoring with the live proctoring on Tower. This would be a new feature that will be launching soon in our platform.
Fantastic. Thank you, Andre. Over to you, Nikhil.
Thank you, Pat. So, good afternoon, everyone. And it is great to be part of this discussion. Thank you, Pat, for inviting me. So, I am Nikhil and I work for TCS, Tata Consultancy Services, which is part of the Tata Group. Today, it operates in more than 55 countries, and more than 600,000 world's best trained consultants and developers are part of the organization. I work in a unit which is called as TCS Ion, and it is focused on supporting education through modular, scalable, and configurable platforms in the space of assessment and learning. And I take care of its business development today in UK and Europe. Our robust, cloud-based platforms, they cater to a diverse ecosystem, which encompasses, I would say, K-12, higher education, vocational, professional organization, awarding organizations, and in some cases, corporate and government sectors also. And in all together, we have conducted more than 400 million plus assessments till date. From an organization perspective, our organization has always been ambidextrous in nature, where one arm is always supporting the current set of customers, while there's another arm which is focused on bringing new innovations, in the space of, specifically nowadays, in the space of artificial intelligence and machine learning. Out of that, there is one solution, TCS Ion Remote Proctoring Assessment, where we compare the videos and the photographs of candidates during the examination with our AI and ML algorithms, and we provide meaningful insights on multiple parameters. If there are multiple people or faces found during the examination, there's no one sitting in front, there's a partial face, detection of different kind of gadgets, screen recording, things like that, which is used in the automated proctoring, while it is also used in record and review, where reviewers look at these flags later on after the assessment to see if there was any kind of malpractice, or even during the live remote proctoring, where if a proctor is looking live at certain set of candidates who are allocated to them, they're also able to see the flags which the system through artificial intelligence is showing as an aid to the markers that there is something happening. So yeah, that's a short intro from my side. Looking forward to this discussion, and thank you again for inviting Pat.
Okay, so what I'm going to do, thanks for that, everybody. What I wanted to do was just start off. I think there's some distinct areas where AI has been used, although we had a dry run last week, and I found something else I hadn't thought about before, which I'll get to. So it's probably three different sorts. So just focusing initially on the ID validation component. So I'm generalizing here. So typically you've got someone's ID, which is on a passport or government issued ID, etc. Then whether it's a phone or the laptop itself, it's got a picture of the individual taking the exam and it's comparing them. Is that pretty robust and reliable? I know I've got it, in my online banking apps. I've got it with two-factor authentication on my phone, etc. Is that pretty reliable now? I know there was all sort of scare stories 3 or 4 years ago about the bias. Is it robust? Is it reliable? Does it work in every situation? I'll start off with you, Adarsh.
Yeah. Now, there are many ways in which you can apply AI in the field of remote proctoring. Some are accurate, some are not so accurate. But what has worked for us? Now, I'm sharing my experience with Excelsoft. Is that if you want to use AI reliably, for large volumes at different stakes of exams, it is always safe and best to pick AI algorithms that have the least amount of false positives, right? Like I said, there are hundreds of things that you can do, including keystroke analysis, audio analysis, post-test forensics, real-time post-test forensics, screen tracking, eyeball tracking. However, the accuracy of these algorithms are below 50%, right? And the false positives are very high. And when such is the case, AI AI creates more work for proctors and reviewers than helping them in the exams. So it is always best to use algorithms and mechanisms that are very high in accuracy, over 90% in accuracy, and single digit false positives. But, simple things like Nikhil mentioned,
Sorry, Adarsh.
like
Sorry to interrupt. I was just talking specifically about the ID validation component. So I'll get onto the rest in a minute. So are there reliable ways out? Is 90% acceptable in terms of facial recognition for someone's ID, or is it much
it
higher?
is.
It seems like
It
an
is
easier
today.
solution to me. Is that?
It is today. Yes, it is today because now there are several standards, and even now government organizations have come up with APIs and validation systems that make it easy for exam conducting bodies to authenticate and validate the ID of people who are taking the exams. So yes, it is definitely better than what it was 3 years ago, and it is getting better by the day, Patrick.
So, Andre, I'm going to ask you the same sort of question. So, are you using your own technology, or have you don't have to say it, or have you bought in technology to do that sort of facial recognition? How do you do that?
So today we are doing through partners. So we have a couple partners that are helping us that on these parts. What I see in the field is, beside of the AI recognizing and making sure that is matching, is the user experience, right? Ensuring that the candidate is well guided through the process to show the ID in the right position. Sometimes the position is not the best one, and ultimately having someone supporting the test taker, because they are on very stressed situation, and even though the AI is here to help for us to have less effort, it's also important to have humans following through the process in case the user needs some help.
So Nikhil, then, so I mean, I know you've already explained a little bit about it. So in terms of the ID validation, is that something that always happens at the point at which the candidate's taking the test, or can you do
Yes.
some people call it a pre-flight test check or something like that, i.e. you can do it beforehand? Because obviously taking exams stressful, people are nervous, and the last thing they want is technical issues. Do you do it beforehand, or is it either or both? How does that work?
Yeah, so it's a good valid point which you mentioned, Pat, because if a student or a candidate is going to appear for an examination, there would have been a registration process, and in that registration process, they would have uploaded or taken a photograph of themselves, as well as they would have uploaded certain ID proofs. Now, at that point of time, if you create certain rules or validation that when someone is taking a photograph, this is how they should stand, what should be the background, and similarly for the documents which they have submitted, it becomes easier for the algorithm. So when that candidate is actually coming for the examination, and you have a very nice photo or a nice ID proof which is already available, against which it can be verified, it makes it easier for the algorithm to give a higher accuracy that whether the same candidate is coming during the at the time of examination. So your dependency on the online registration, it increases. So that's one point. But the other point which you mentioned, Pat, that maybe I am the candidate, I came for the examination, at the registration, I registered myself, but after 10 minutes I'm replaced by someone else. So that kind of validation needs to be throughout the examination. It cannot be just at that point of registration. So uh, today also we do that. What happens today is that randomly, 10 minutes later, 15 minutes later, it will be validated with the original photo which was taken at the time of registration for the examination, as well as at the time when the candidate was applying for the examination, and it is validated with the current picture or the current video of the candidate in between those examinations at random pieces. So yes, it is important to validate at the start as well as, you know, along the examination. And there are ways to it, Pat, in which it is being done.
I suppose, like anything, there's, I think, as you were saying, the technology is improving, and you, Andre, have made the point as well. The technology can only get better. So in terms of actually proving the candidate is who they say they are, is getting easier. There's lots of tools and other things you can do. Back to your point, Nikhil, the key is there's always going to be exceptions. So someone hasn't got an ID, or they've lost it, or something like that, etc. So there's always got to be a backup, some sort of human intervention where they can do it, which is how I think a lot of organizations used to do it, or probably some still do, without using AI. It's up to a person to say, yes, that's a person that you know that they say they are. So I understand that works. What about, I guess, are they different? Can you customize how secure it is? I mean, obviously, the candidate's got to be who the candidate is, but perhaps it's less important for a practice test or something than it is, or is it very much one size fits all sort of thing? They are who they say they are, or they're not. Is there any flexibility in that at all?
If you want, I would agree with that. Yes, I think it needs to be customizable, Pat, because different sectors, first of all, you know, if you look at the requirements of customers operating in the medical domain, they're quite different. Even if you have proctors available, they definitely want 1:1 ratio for certain examinations, depending on whether it's a high stake, whether it's a medium stake, or whether it's low stake assessment. There are different parameters or different things which you want to be captured and verified. So it needs to be customizable. It cannot be one size fits all, because then you're missing certain things. And similarly, from that perspective, technology also needs to be like that. You mentioned about, you know, that there might be certain people who do not have a valid ID proof. So there are certain organizations who tell us that, no, I will not allow the person to sit in the examination at all, while there are certain organizations which they allow the candidates, and they say that, okay, it's fine, we will have the video of the entire assessment. Later on, we'll give a chance to the candidate to upload you know, their valid ID proof. So one size fits all. These are certain scenarios which can happen on exam day, but there are certain different type of candidates. We need to take care of sent candidates and other people. So from my perspective, experience which I've seen in the market, solutions needs to be customizable.
Go on, Adarsh, you were going to say.
Yeah, and also it depends on the affordability and the market we are operating in, in addition to what Nikhil mentioned, and the stakes of the exam. So there are exams that are very high stake in nature, and the exam conducting bodies are willing to spend a little more on the technology and on the security of the exams. And there are exams that happen that are still high stake, but no, I would say medium stake. They still need security, but do not have the affordability of bringing in additional technology, because when you use AI, it requires more compute, it requires more memory, it requires more streaming and processing, and you use it in combination with additional APIs for ID validation. That all increases the cost. So again, in addition to what Nikhil mentioned, affordability, the sector we are operating in, the geography or the market we are operating in, all matters. And tuning the level of security throughout the process in your offerings is very important for providers like ourselves.
Yeah, and I would go further in terms of not only adapting per test, right? We have high stakes, medium stakes, portability, but for the candidates. So for instance, candidates who have disabilities, right? For instance, they will need to use read aloud tools to read the test throughout. And then, well, we cannot consider this as a regularity during the process. So we need to consider also the test taker in order to adapt and making sure that the configurations are well suited for them as well.
Actually, that's a really good point, Andre. I'm glad you brought that up, because accessibility is so important. I think the opportunity that online proctoring, in terms of making it easier for people to be able to take an exam in any location, is adding a lot of flexibility. But equally, you've got to make sure that those assistive technologies, I know that and I'm sure these might be exceptions that most sort of online proctoring providers are doing a secure browser option, or without secure browser, so you can use screen readers and different tools, etc., that are freely available to make sure that you're not disadvantaging one particular group of candidates. So I focus very much on the sort of the ID validation bit. There's a really good question from Jeff, but I'm going to go back to that at the end if that's okay, because I'm not sure if it's an easy question to answer or not, but I want to get to sort of the heart of it. So in terms of online proctoring, we accept you've got live proctoring where you've got someone there, they're watching you take the exam, absolutely fine. You might have one person watching one candidate take exam, you might have one proctor watching 2 people, 3 people, 4 people. I'm sure there's different variations of that people do. So in terms of the actual information that you're using, I think Adarsh, you mentioned before about eye movement and head movement. I know Nikhil, you mentioned other things about keystrokes, etc. Is all this being taken in isolation, or is it the fact that I'm looking away from the screen and I've started typing more quickly or answering the questions more quickly? Is it that sophisticated, or does it vary again depending on how you figure? I'm going to start with you, Andre, so for this one.
Yeah, so on my situation there, we can configure, right? So for instance, for each test, how we would consider this regularity. So for instance, the keyboard sound, right? So we could flag it as an incident or an irregularity, or for this specific instance, there is no problem. So our algorithm, it's based on configuration, can give more or less weight for some situations, and a combination of them as well. So in case, as you just mentioned, Pat, if there's a combination of actions that we understand that, well, based on this configuration is not a regularity, then in terms of AI point, because we have the how much this specific task is considered that contains a regularity and where. So the score of regularity is going to be low or high according to the configuration and according to the actions of the candidate.
Fantastic. So Nikhil, is it a similar situation with you then, that how you manage that?
It is quite similar, where I would say, there are certain areas, if you want to detect facial expressions, for example, the algorithms for that, they have developed quite nicely. And considering the volume of examinations which we have done in the past, we have lots of data, to train the AI systems from that perspective. But on the other side, certain other things which are coming up in the algorithm space, body movements, eye movements, there's still some work to be done. So there are two kinds of things. One is that while there is work on the algorithms and training it more with certain data, there is also certain configurations which Andre touched upon, that you can say that what is acceptable. If the algorithms detects that there is 20% anomaly, then do you accept it as a normal behavior, or do you not accept it? So for considering the false negatives and false positives also is something which we need to look at. And for that, every organization, to be honest, based on their experience, the type of examinations they do, it differs, and it needs to be configured accordingly.
I'm going to ask you something in a minute, Adarsh, but I'm going to just pick up on something that Nikhil mentioned there. I said we had a dry run last week when we were talking about this subject, and it's something that I'd vaguely heard about, but hadn't really sort of considered in much detail. So based on the facial expression of the candidate, providing an indication on how difficult the question might be, or if there was any bias or something else. So, if people like, certain sorts of people in certain regions, etc., react differently, does that mean there's some bias there? Or if everyone's suddenly got a look of shock and horror on their face, does that mean it's a really difficult question? So suddenly there's all these things, because we're recording lots of video. What it means is there's actually data that we can then use. So Adarsh, I guess initially when you first start doing online proctoring, you've got a generic model. Is that constantly being trained in real time, or do you sort of cut it off and then use old data to retrain the model? How does that work?
No, we definitely train it, but we cannot train it based on our customers' data. So different customers, have different preferences. Again, it depends on the geography, it depends on the law of the land. Ultimately, it is left to the customer whether they would allow us their data to be used for training our algorithms. Most of the government customers, most of the Western countries are very careful about using their data. So we seldom get to use data from our Western customers to train our models. Some of the emerging economies where the laws are not that strict and the customers are a little more willing to allow their data legally to be used for training, we have seen success. But in order to keep our algorithms unbiased and in order to have ensure that we have a diverse set of training data, we always work on getting data sets, uh, trained labeled data sets from different parts of the world to ensure our algorithms are fair and have less bias. But yeah, to answer your question specifically, Patrick, yes, we constantly train our algorithms. That is the only way to get better in detecting anomalies better.
Mm-hmm. So, Adarsh, you've raised something there. I'm going to put this over to you, Nikhil. So, obviously, you're recording people, you're taking their information there. How long do you keep this after the exam's finished? Is it deleted instantly? Does it vary depending on whether there's been a potential issue? How is that managed, or is it customer specific again?
Okay, perfect. So, as Adarsh was mentioning, Pat, there are three ways, in which we generate this data. First is there is free data available, across geographies and things like that, which can be used to train the system. Second is from customers' perspective, it depends. There are customers who are willing to support us, and at the time of examination itself, we take certain consent from their end users also, that whether this data can be used for training purposes and things like that. And at that time, along with the customer, we also try to set up processes that for what purpose as well as for what duration we are going to keep this data. So there is not a fixed duration, to be honest, but it changes. And once the algorithms are trained from those perspectives, you can keep removing that kind of data. And there's a third element also, which is very useful, because if you want data for a larger duration, then there are certain exercises which are conducted specifically for gathering that training data. So you do certain assessments either with your customers or through your own. We do certain our own examinations in multiple countries. So we take consent from our end users that will be using this for a purpose of training our data for this much duration. So there's no fixed duration, but we try to depends on the customers as well as different examination and needs of the system, we keep the data.
Actually, I'm just going to, at that point, there's a couple of questions here that I think are appropriate. So I'm just going to read out. I've got one here from Donald Van Metra. It says, do you have a sense as to whether AI proctoring is actually working to deter cheating? It's on the screen, so I won't have to read it out. Thank you very much for that, Andy. So I think the question is I'm going to partly answer this, then I'm going to open it out to my guests here, because can I just start off by saying that I've worked for many organizations that have test center networks. I've worked for assessment providers that use test centers. Please don't assume that test centers are 100% secure and reliable and perfect, because that's certainly not the case. So I don't think so. While online proctoring will have its issues, which we're sort of talking about here, that's what we're trying to get to the nub of. Is it perfect, etc.? But I don't think that any situation, unless you individually know the candidate in advance, etc. But that's obviously, it doesn't happen with a lot of exams. You don't know the individual. There's no connection. It's not like I'm your tutor, therefore, a school or something, when you know the kids, it's the right person, etc. So I think that there always are going to be challenges. We have got an online proctoring survey going out later this week. So we're sending out one to online proctoring providers like my colleagues Adarsh, Andre, Nikhil here, who are going to be hopefully responding to that. I'll be nagging them if they don't. But then also we've got another survey going out to users of online proctoring, where we're trying to get their feedback about what they think about online proctoring, what their motivations are. We actually haven't asked, and this is one of the questions, because we asked about cheating. We haven't asked that because from my experience, a lot of organizations don't often want to say actually the problem or people are cheating, etc. It's a really good question. Maybe it's one of those where we have to, it's more like an individual sort of in-person research rather than a questionnaire that might have to be done. But I think that's a really good question. I don't think it's perfect, but equally, I don't think test centers are perfect either, particularly when you get to remote centers, etc. In other countries. Plus, I know that in the UK, for example, there were situations where there was cheating rings going on. Anything that has a value, there's going to be people that are going to try and exploit it and make money out of it. So I think that's always going to be a situation where it's not perfect. So, oh, by the way, on the question on the surveys, by the way, we will be sharing it once we've got the results back. It's all planned in time for our June conference. If you haven't booked your ticket, please do so now. Early bird ends on Sunday. Anyway, so back to the online proctoring. So in terms of the false positives, so Miriam, if you could just pop that question up again. So what the question is about, can it be a hindrance in terms of false flags? So if I just get it right, so what's happening is you've got AI monitoring the screen, what's going on, it's being recorded so you can check, you've got evidence later on. So once that something gets flagged up, whatever that is, I know there's probably a secret sauce about how you flag that up. What happens then does the person get an AI warning, the AI saying, hold on a minute, you're moving your head too much or you're moving your eyes too much? Or does it go straight to a person who then has to make the decision? Or again, back to the point, is it configurable? Does it depend? I'll start off with you, Andre, to answer that one, if that's okay.
Yeah, so then I'm going to consider the full solution we have with both partners that we are working on. So looking from the record and review, right? So what's going to happen, you're going to flag and be able to, a human, to review later. And of course, the human does not need to go over all the tests, but also only on the irregularities. So depends on how we configure, the irregularity will be green, yellow, or red. Depends on how much we configure for this to be considered regularity. And then we allow the proctor or the person that is reviewing to investigate not only what's happening on our screens, what the test taker was doing, the keyboards, to hear to watch for the video on just this part. So we give tools for them to review later and then take actions, right? If this is an irregularity that's considered to be terminated or invalid the test, then the proctor can take this action. And since we have still stored, we have proofs to give to the candidate why the proctor is taking this decision, and then we can send later to the candidate. So this is one flavor that we have. Then the second flavor that we are implementing, which is live proctoring, we have a possibility to show to the students whenever have any irregularities that our system recognize, to show the student that is of course is optional. We know how stressful can be for the students, but we have this option to show to the student that happened something in the very same time. And then the proctor can either take a decision to talk through the chats, to talk two-way audios with the candidate. So there are tools in place to act upon in the very same time that is happening. And then, of course, the proctor will be seeing all the things that are happening, all the irregularities, while the student that they can also see it in case it's configured. So we give all the possibilities to the customer to handle this, and those are the ways that today we are doing.
So what about you, Adarsh? Are you doing that in terms of, so something gets flagged up, does the AI intervene initially, or does it go straight to the person? How does that work? Or again, it varies?
Yeah, false positives are a big problem, especially when you're doing large volume testing. We have seen that, to be very frank. Not so long ago, we have gotten really excited and tried to turn on all AI algorithms and mechanisms, irrespective of their accuracy. And then we have seen hundreds of flags popping up in an exam because AI is too sensitive to every small movement, every small little thing done by the candidate. So what we did, was, especially when you're doing large volume testing, you're testing thousands of candidates, tens of thousands of candidates. It always works to stick to algorithms which have very high accuracy and very low false positives. Like simple things. The 6 flags that we have is no face detected. Right. So if the camera feed does not detect the face, if I mode of the camera frame, there is a very high accuracy. With very high accuracy, you can detect that the candidate has moved out of the camera frame. Multiple faces detected in the camera frame. A wrong face detected. And, I'm not the candidate I'm supposed to be. User not focusing on the screen. With very high accuracy, I can detect if the user is looking around elsewhere and not focusing on the screen. External objects in the camera frame, like the books, phones, headphones, and all that with very high accuracy. And finally, any human background voice in the room. Now, these are checks that return very high accuracy. I mean, the chance of going wrong and giving you false flags is very low, and it reduces the load on your reviewers and proctors. Now, we have worked with universities who are sitting on hundreds and hundreds of hours of recorded test sessions, thousands of flags. They simply do not have the manpower to go and review these flags. So the more accurate we are with identifying these flags, the better, and the more optimal it is for organizations to detect anomalies accurately.
So, Nikhil, I'll ask that of you as well. So, is it very customizable in terms of the engagement of the proctor? Because I guess, sounding mercy, it's all about the cost, isn't it? And the more you have to have human intervention, the more expensive it is. So, therefore, presumably, the more the customer pays for it. So, is that trying to be minimized, or is it just a balance and it's up to the customer to decide?
Yes, it is mostly dependent on 2 elements, Pat. First is with the stakes of the examination, high stake, medium stake, or low stake. In high stake, you definitely do not want anything to be missed at all. And secondly, it also depends on the cost, that how much, is the budget to put in these particular things. And as you were saying that, remote proctoring, it is not perfect, but it is up there. I would say that we need to look at as an aid. If not anything, then it is an aid to people. That suppose there's no remote proctoring, then I will actually have to look at a 3 hours video of a 3-hour exam, but that is reducing it to maybe 15 minutes, record and review. Or during live assessments also, as a proctor, it is sometimes, there are many examinations in which, because of cost and other elements, you end up having 1:6 or 1:7 proctor ratio. Somehow it is very difficult to look simultaneously as a proctor at 7 different candidates and see that everyone is cheating or not. While if you get certain flags, it is easier, to look at that particular candidate or focus on that thing. So I would suggest that, yes, it is definitely an aid. Now, that how to use it, it depends on factors like whether it's in a high stake or on the budget also.
I'm going to ask a question here. I think that Adarsh, you might answer this. So I think it was something that you might have alluded to before. So in addition to checking items that are flagged by proctoring, I think you mentioned pens and books and phones, do you also check items which aren't flagged up to make sure that they were? I think that's the right thing. It was from Lisa B there. Are items to ensure accuracy when AI is not missing anything? I think that might be referring to the fact that other items that we haven't thought of or haven't been mentioned, will they still get flagged up? Or does it only respond to things that it's been pre-trained to recognize?
So AI only recognizes things that it has been pre-trained to recognize. So, for example, the AirPods, there are AirPods that are getting smaller and shorter. We often come across situations where the AirPods go unrecognized. Now we can clearly see in the recordings that there is an object somewhere in the ear, but the AI could not detect it with high accuracy. So AI clearly recognizes things it has been trained to recognize. But you can always, on the other hand, you can always tell AI what all to recognize and raise a flag for. So some exams require calculators. So calculators are not a red flag. You can tell AI that this is in the allow list. This calculator is in the allow list for the exam, so that a red flag doesn't pop up for a calculator. Like that, you can always put items in the block list or allow list, telling AI what to raise flag against and what not to raise flag against.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. I'm just going to go. There's some other things I just want to talk about, but before that, I'm going to make sure I cover some of the questions off now. That's okay. There was a question about can you make sure that someone has a female proctor? So many Muslim women are wearing the hijab, and it's saying about that. I've come across this before, and I know that people can request a female proctor for a session, and the same for reviewing as well if it's a record and review option. So I know that gets covered to do that. I think the other thing as well is just a point about a headphone or an earbud or something could also be a hearing aid or something like that. So you've also got to be sensitive to the fact that is it acceptable or not. In a test center, someone might be able to make that judgment call, but again, unless you've trained the AI to recognize that, you've got to make sure that you're not penalizing anyone because the AI can't work it out. And I think that's why in a lot of situations you've got the human making the final decision about whether you terminate an exam and what you do. There's two questions here that are related that I just wanted to flag up. One was sort of early on from Jeff Chapman. Hopefully we'll be able to scale that. And it's got, now the honest answer is I've not heard of this. I'm not a technical person. You guys might have done. But I think this is basically non-physical ID, whether that's something that's been happening. I'm thinking that further down the line, when you, with your bank account and with credit card payments and those sort of things, I think that there will be more of a synchronization with those sort of technologies, because if it's good enough for my bank to come or my credit card company to confirm, is that the sort of thing that this is? Are there other sort of non-physical IDs that people are using, or is that something that's for the future? Adarsh, going to you.
Yeah, no, if there are several countries that have already started using digital identity service providers. In India, we have the Aadhaar system. The government and several government approved agencies provide APIs for us to validate the identity and a lot of personal information about all citizens of India. Right, so we have been actively using this in all our competitive exams, high-stake exams that are being conducted in India. We do the same in Singapore. We do the same in Malaysia. So we are seeing an increase in the number of such providers in different geographies, and I think this will continue to increase because it is so easy for from an exam point of view, from a candidate experience point of view, everything happens digitally, right? And it is very authentic because you are validating with government approved agency.
And I think it's an extension that Derek Welsh was just asking about, an increase in certain countries and introducing new biometric data protection. I know that it's something that I come across a lot in my sort of day job, where people are saying, so when you are recording, you do need to record the video of the sessions, because what you do need is evidence. So if a decision is being made by a proctor to terminate an exam, you need to be able to say, and this is why. So I think if there's an exception or an incident or whatever you want to call it, where there's something, you do have to keep that as a record. However, if you're happy with the exam, and I think this is something that's predefined by the customer, as soon as the session's finished, you don't need, and I'm sure most organizations don't want to store terabytes of data that doesn't have a purpose. So it's actually being removed as well. So I think in terms of data protection, we've got to make sure that we keep up with the rules. I am going to move on to a subject now. And again, this was something that we discussed last week. So I think it was you that brought it up, Nikhil, was when you've got a test center, you've got physical test centers, but of course you can be using AI to monitor physical test centers. So you've got a room with however many, 20, 30 machines in, or it could be hundreds, I guess, with people taking exams. I guess potentially you could have someone in a location where they can be proctored one-on-one in that room, but also having cameras in the room watching the wider room. Can you just explain that about, Nick? I think it was you that mentioned that that's something that you use.
Definitely, Pat. So yes, with the technology, with the investment which we are doing in artificial intelligence and machine learning, why only remote proctor tests? So why not test center-based examinations? And one point when you were answering a question, Pat, that the first question I think in this session was that, whether to go ahead with remote proctored examinations or test center based examinations. So, and you mentioned that in test center based assessments also, there are a lot many things which are dependent on people. So that was the first thing which we tried to sort out, that how can we use AI for invigilators, for proctoring the proctors, you can say, or proctoring the invigilators from that perspective. Yes, what we do today is that all the proctors, they are having a special dress code or a special jacket, through which the system identifies that they are proctors or they are invigilators, and then their movements, they are captured, which are multiple things, multiple checks, like whether they're spending a lot of time in front of a particular candidate, whether they are moving, all the time, or they are staying at a particular place. Then it also monitors a group of invigilators, that whether all the invigilators, whether they're talking to each other or whether they're doing their duty. Sometimes the invigilators, they just stand in a classroom and they'll start talking to each other for hours. So these are some sample checks, but yes, we thought that we can utilize this technology or this investment in test center based assessment also to make them more secure. And because we do a lot of test center based assessments also in India, so yeah, this was one of the areas which we did look at.
I think the thing is that the more you can do to ensure the integrity of the exam, the better. And this one here asking another one from Gautam Roy, is it about people making movements, etc. Again, there was an example that I was discussing with someone about someone with autism, about whose head might move a lot more than someone who didn't. So from that perspective, again, is that a judgment call from the proctor to make that decision about that's fine, that's acceptable, there's obviously nothing sinister, or actually is that something that needs to be captured beforehand, so that you're taking that decision away from the proctor, because actually you're saying this person has got special circumstances or special situation, they've got a lot more latitude in terms of doing that. Is that something? Equally, it could be that someone's got a helper, they've got someone that's reading, that's doing the mouse, etc. There could be other things going on, etc., accommodations that might be needed. Are those something that you really should be flagging up in advance rather than having the proctor make those decisions?
Yes, and I think, in proctored examinations, online proctored examinations, the key thing is that you should be capturing the candidate as well as the room or the place where, they're giving the examination. Yes, there are multiple ways to do it. So there are certain bodies who just want that during the registration process, you take a video of the room and go ahead with one camera. But most of the customers which we are working with right now, they believe that for the entire duration, we should capture the room as well as candidate, which means usage of two cameras. One is the camera in the laptop or the device in which they're assessing, which captures the front part of the candidate, while there's a camera which is kept on the right or left side of the candidate, which is a mobile phone most probably, which captures the candidate as well as the room, to give a full view of the candidate during the entire exam.
Yeah, and then the combination of both analysis, like the front and the left or the right, would be helping to have less false positive, because then we have two angles, right? Then we can have more data to do the analysis on if it is an irregularity or not.
Correct.
Of course, you've got to have the assumption that the candidate's got a smartphone. What about the bandwidth implications? I'm always very conscious about in terms of making it inclusive so that anyone can take an exam anywhere in the world. Is that an issue if you come across, or I don't know? I'm not going to get into technical specifications, but how do you manage it in limited bandwidth in some countries, or expensive bandwidth? It could be the bandwidth's available, but if the individual's having to pay for it, that could make it punitive as well. So how do you manage that?
Bandwidth is definitely an issue when you're considering live proctoring, and adding a secondary camera further increases the bandwidth, making it not a very inclusive solution. So we do use secondary camera as a solution when the security requirements are very high, and when the organization, the exam conducting body, is very clear about the audience. So they have, it is the responsibility of the exam conducting body to ensure all the test takers are made aware of the requirements of the additional hardware and the additional bandwidth. To solve some of these bandwidth issues, there are some solutions from a technology point of view that we can come up with. For example, when the candidate starts the exam, the bandwidth is great, right? So, but somewhere during the exam, the bandwidth comes down. It is intermittent or it is flaky. Instead of terminating the session, what the remote proctoring system can do is it can gracefully downgrade from a video based remote proctoring to an image based remote proctoring. If it is record interview, especially if it is recording two streams of video, it can gracefully downgrade from recording the live video stream to taking images at regular intervals. And if the bandwidth comes back, recovers, it would bump up, go back up to streaming the videos. So that small intelligence can be built into the system so that the user experience is seamless while there is no compromise on the security aspects.
Yes. One
Yeah.
key thing which we, yeah, sorry. So one key thing which we are also doing in this space, Pat, is that yes, while we can downgrade to different modes of proctoring, there are certain geographies or areas which do not have internet connectivity at all, you know. And for doing online assessments, either you use USBs or you pre-download the assessments over there. So how we also faced certain situations where how do we conduct remote proctored examinations. So we are also working on building a capability that during the assessment the video is actually not sent online. It is being recorded and kept in the device itself, just like the responses of candidates and other stuff. And later on, it can be uploaded, and then the servers of artificial intelligence and machine learning, they can verify. So this is also a step of conducting, to be honest, remote proctored exams in a complete offline mode, which will completely solve the challenge of internet connections.
Andre,
Yeah, yeah. From my side, on top of what Adarsh mentioning to downgrade gracefully the way that we are capturing the information, I think another concern we have with the assessment platform itself, right? So in my case, behind the scenes, we are also ensuring that if we have internet connection oscillation on it, the assessment we also try to gracefully downgrade by downloading as fast as we can the next questions. So in this case, not only the remote proctoring, but also the online assessment platform need to be with this the same mechanism, not only one part, and then working together. This is the way that we take, and as well as when downloading the assessment, also using some compression to ensure that the candidate do not need a lot of internet connection, a lot of bandwidth to play or to use or to take the test.
Brilliant. I'm actually going to just give a brief summary now because I'm conscious of time. We've only got a few minutes left. So there was just a question about proctoring the proctors, which I think Nikhil mentioned before, about watching the proctors to make sure that they are both in live test centers, but also remotely proctoring the proctors to make sure they're at their desk and they've not wandered off, etc. So I think that's something that can be monitored on an ongoing basis to provide that. So I think the key for me in terms of takeaways is we've got different sorts of proctoring, online proctoring, whether it's live, AI assisted, which is obviously what we're talking about here, or record and review. So I think we have different sort of options available. The key is, I think, what's appropriate to the customer, depending on how secure they want it, but also the budget. Again, different countries, different requirements, different price points. You need to be able to support all of those, and we're not in a perfect world where everything's cost effective. So there's a cost associated with a lot of different things. So I think we have to have that flexibility, but also customization of the online proctoring solution, both for accessibility, different markets, different requirements as well, to make sure that we can support all candidates and none of them are disadvantaged. I'm not saying test centers are going to disappear overnight. I think there's still, people that will still want those. However, for me, the big benefit of online proctoring is the fact that you can take something when you want, the opportunity for doing it on demand. So actually you think, do you know what? I'm ready to take the exam now. I'm going to take it, which is one of the big benefits to me of online proctoring generally. But any online exam, if you can do it at the point when you need it, not at the point when you schedule it in the future. So I think there's lots of, for me, I think there's so much more work to do though. I think some of the things that Nikhil was suggesting about candidate expressions, about using that data, providing we're allowed to, in terms of data protection, because the data protection is obviously got to be paramount in all of this. But then don't forget, test centers also record videos. Does that get deleted? I don't know. So this, you walk down the street, you're being videoed. How long is that kept for? So I think there's a much wider thing about how technology is recording you, but we've got to make sure that we're compliant with all the laws required to make sure that we are protecting individuals. I'm going to end up just on one thing, because it's a bit of a pitch for another special interest group. We're going to be setting up a special interest group for ISO 23988, which is the use of ICT for the delivery of assessments. Now, I'm working on co-editor of that. I will be getting the people on the call to try and help me as well, by the way. But we're setting up a special interest group specifically to extend a standard that was produced almost 20 years ago in a very different world. And one of the things we want to include within that specification, currently it's a code of practice, is around the details around online proctoring and practice. So I'm hoping that a lot of the information we've captured here will be included in that. But because we're setting up a special interest group, what it means as well is we're also able to engage people within the eAA to be able to feed into that. So we've got something that's very sexily entitled Category C type organization. So the eAA and its members will be able to input into that standard. And online proctoring is something that hopefully will include. So on that note, I'm conscious of time. I'll pass over to my colleagues to say goodbye here.
Thank you. And one final point I'll just like to add, Pat, that, the questions and other things, it seems that we are comparing test center based assessments with online proctored assessments. And, to be honest, proctoring, we have always referred to something, as, keeping an eye on the candidate to ensure that they don't cheat during an examination. But with technology, things are changing. Both the test center based assessments and online assessments, they can work together. Proctoring is not only about thinking or ensuring that the candidate doesn't cheat. It is also ensuring many other things, like the facial expressions of a candidate, that whether a question was easy looking, if the candidate is happy, whether it was tough, if the candidate is looking worried, and many other things which can add to the overall value of assessments, even if it is a test center based assessment. So
I'm going
thank
to
you.
cut you off there because we've reached time and I'm conscious that people are going to have to get off to other calls, etc. So thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you.
I really appreciate it. If anyone's got any questions, please send them through and we'll answer those afterwards. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Have a nice